Going down the ladder of manner of articulation, you will get to approximant and lateral approximant. So both of them are approximants. After fricatives, we get to approximants. And why is it so? Because if you start from the top, you would know that when you pronounce a plosive like ta, it is plosive in the sense that you press the articulators hard against each other and you release the air suddenly. In the previous video, I explained how that's partly the case for fricatives, except for the release part, because in the case of fricatives, articulators, they touch but they don't press hard, and that's how you can continuously pronounce fricatives. So approximant is used as a noun here to refer to a kind of consonantal sound or a consonant. If you here look at the alveolar, the voiced alveolar sound da, and then change your manner of articulation by moving your articulators slightly farther apart, instead of da, you will end up saying za. But now, if you increase the distance between your articulators, you will end up pronouncing ra or la. So in a way, the difference between an approximant and a fricative is how far apart the two articulators are. An approximant is a term in phonetics referring to a speech sound that belongs to the broad class of frictionless continuants. So there's no friction between the two articulators. In the articulation of approximants, the active articulator approaches the passive articulator, but the degree of narrowing or the distance between the two articulators does not produce any audible friction. So you need to be careful. There is like a sweet spot in terms of the distance, because in the case of approximants, there's no friction, but there is turbulence of air between the two articulators. But if the distance between the two articulators is so big that there is no turbulence of air, there is no air turbulence, you will pronounce the vowels. Approximants are the most relaxed consonants. Approximants are of two types: central approximants, or just approximants, and lateral approximants. So if you look at the consonant chart, you will see that in the chart, when they are central, the word central is not mentioned. It just says approximant. It's only when the approximant is lateral that you put the word lateral there. So if it's central, you can just say approximant. So you have central approximant and you have lateral approximants, and both of them together are part of the larger group of approximants. Another interesting observation in the case of approximants is that all approximants are voiced. If you want to talk about English, the English sound ra is a central approximant. During its production, the alveolar ridge, because it is an alveolar sound or a voiced alveolar central approximant, is approached by the tongue tip, and air flows down the middle of the tongue. If you want to flow air down the middle of your tongue, you have to raise the sides of your tongue. But if you do the opposite, if you raise the middle of your tongue and allow air to be released laterally, which means on the sides, you will pronounce la. That's why when you pronounce la, you clearly feel your tongue on your alveolar ridge. It can actually press it hard. You see? You'll feel the release on the sides. Is the release lateral? Then it's a lateral approximant. Is the release central? Then it's a central approximant. Other than ra and la, the only two other approximants in English are ya, which you can see here. It's a palatal approximant. It's a voiced palatal approximant. The other approximant in English is the w, wa. It's a doubly articulated approximant. It's labially velarly articulated approximant. If you look at the sound ha in English, you would see that it's a voiceless glottal fricative. But what happens in real contexts in English, a lot of times the consonant ha, which is a fricative, is pronounced like an approximant because it merges with its following vowel. For example, the word happy or hat, the ha, the distance between the articulators during the articulation of ha is increased in a way that the distance would be more like the distance for an approximant than a fricative. In the articulation of approximants, the articulators, the speech organs, approach, that is, they approximate each other, and air flows between them continuously. Therefore, approximants are also members of the bigger class of sounds known as continuants. You can classify approximants into two classes of liquids and glides. In the pronunciation of liquids, the size of the tongue and the size of the teeth ridge approach each other whilst the tongue tip rests on the alveolar ridge and air flows over the sides of the tongue, which is this description of the lateral la, sometimes referred to as a lateral. B, the tongue tip approaches the alveolar ridge and air flows down the middle of the tongue, ra. So basically, lateral and central approximants together are grouped into liquids. The la and ra are called liquid sounds. Glides are speech sounds in which the two speech organs approach each other and then glide away. That's why they're called glide, because you would see glide in liquid. If you want to look for examples in other languages, for example, the voiced palatal lateral approximant exists in Spanish. In Spanish, la, single L represents a sound, but double L is treated like a different letter, right? Technically, they're very close to each other. The single L stands for the alveolar lateral approximant, but the double L stands for the voiced palatal lateral approximant. An example would be llamar,
galleta,
llave. Maya mesh and Maya in the sense of the Mayan civilization.
Maya y Maya.
They are homophones in Mexican Spanish, are pronounced as a voiced palatal lateral approximant. When our Spanish speaker pronounces the sound, it might sound to you like ja or sometimes like ya. And this is also why when Latin American speakers, Mexican speakers learn English, they might have difficulty distinguishing between ya and ja, both in perception and in production. An English speaker would sound equally funny in Spanish because we can't pronounce the lateral approximant, we can only pronounce the central approximant. So this explains why there is this interesting thing happening across English and Spanish when people learn one of the other language, whether you're a Spanish speaker learning English or English speaker trying to speak Spanish.